Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar on the need for welfare legislation for aquatic animals. We're sorry for the little delay. We had some technical issues we were trying to fix. Fish are sentient animals capable of suffering and feeling pain. They are a numerous group, and they are not as protected by legislation as other animals. Citizens are increasingly interested in the welfare of fish, and this is the reason why we have gathered experts and MEPs today to talk about fish welfare. Before we start, just some technical information. You may use the Q&A tool of the platform to ask your questions and indicate which speaker you're addressing. This will be later during the Q&A session. We will try to raise as many questions as possible. In case you experience any technical difficulties, you can send a message to our staff via the chat. The webinar is being recorded. In case you wish to receive the recording, you will receive an email from the platform with information after the webinar, and you can then proceed to send an email. We will be live tweeting about the webinar, and you're welcome to join us with the hashtag #RethinkFish. So we can start now. We start with our MEPs, and MEP Anja Hazekamp takes the floor.
Thank you so much, Olga. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining this important webinar about fish welfare. Fish, just like other animals, are sentient beings, and therefore we must pay full regard to their welfare as recognized also in the Lisbon Treaty. However, the fact that fish and also other marine invertebrate species are sentient beings is not reflected in the EU animal protection rules. It is not reflected in the way that these animals are being treated, and it is not reflected in the way that fisheries and ocean policies are being discussed in the European Parliament and other institutions. When I participated for the first time in a meeting of the European Parliament's Fisheries Committee, it made me feel very uncomfortable that people were talking about fish stocks instead of fish populations. People were talking about fish biomass instead of sentient animals. And people were focusing on getting as much as possible out of the sea for human use, or rather more than that. As if a fish that is not taken out of the water would be some kind of waste, as if the fish swimming in the water would have no value unless it is eaten by animals or fed to an animal in the intensive animal industry or aquaculture. I think there have been some positive developments since then. The topic of fish welfare has increasingly been addressed, not only in the European Parliament, but also in other areas, for instance, in science. The most recent example dating from last week, when the London School of Economics and Political Science once again reaffirmed that non-vertebrate animals such as octopuses, squids, and lobsters are able to feel pain, pleasure, hunger, thirst, warmth, joy, comfort, and excitement. And this recent study means that the marine invertebrates will have to be considered as sentient beings in decision-making processes in the UK. And I see no reason why this should be any different in the European Union. We have also seen the recent study, octopus farming, factory farming, a recipe for disaster. And this study leaves no room for doubt and means that we have to do everything within our power to prohibit attempts to introduce octopus farming. And it has not only been science that addressed the issue of fish welfare increasingly in the past. Also, campaigns such as Rethink Fish and events like today are very important in order to influence the perception of fish and marine invertebrates, to raise awareness for serious animal welfare issues, and to help addressing these issues in the European Parliament. And last month, we achieved a small victory in the European Parliament. In the Farm to Fork Initiative report, we were able to include a call for higher welfare methods of capture, landing, transport and slaughter of fish and marine invertebrates. And on the basis of the best available science, as well as improvements to animal welfare standards of farms for farm fish. However, there is still a lot of work to be done and to achieve a real change to end the suffering of fish and marine invertebrates. And today, we all can take another step in this process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anja. Will Mr. Guerreiro take the floor now? Oh, hello. We can hear you now.
Yeah, I don't think my camera is on, but well, I'll make the statement so we can continue. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation, for co-chairing this event with my colleagues, Catherine and Anja. Obviously, this is a very important subject for me. Also because scientific evidence has demonstrated that most aquatic animals, like obviously other animals, are capable of effective states of pain, fear, and psychological stress. Fish are also recognized as sentient animals by European legislation. However, that legislation concerning the welfare of fish is very limited and poorly enforced, primarily due to the lack of detailed recommendations. Therefore, I welcome this event organized by Compassion in World Farming to further raise awareness and press the European Commission to present a legislative proposal on the minimum standards for the protection of farmed fish as soon as possible. I also welcome my colleagues, Catherine and Anja, and their both political groups in the nearby future, so we could work probably in the nearby future, next year, on a proposal on the PESH committee to initiate the process of own initiative report on fish welfare, which could examine the main issues associated with European aquaculture and fish welfare to produce useful recommendations for the European Commission. Thank you again for this event, and I'm very glad and hoping to see and listen the speakers in a couple of minutes. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much. And now we proceed directly to the main part of the webinar. And we start with Dr. Christoph Wojtas. Christoph leads Compassion World Farming's European-wide Rethink Fish team. And the team works to improve the welfare of fish and other aquatic animals across the EU continent and beyond. Before joining Compassion World Farming, Christoph worked as an assistant professor at the Wrocław University of Environmental and Life Sciences. And he has a background in animal science, and especially his PhD degree is on fish welfare. Christoph, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Olga. Can everyone see my screen? The presentation, perfect. Let me just do one adjustment. Well, good morning. I want to start with thanking the MEPs who are hosting this event, for whom fish welfare is a topic close to their hearts. My presentation will be a sort of a call to the Commission and Parliament members on the fact that fish welfare needs to be properly addressed in the legislation. The European Commission, as all people here I'm sure know, is undertaking the really impressive task of reshaping the animal welfare legislation in the EU. An ambitious and much needed initiative that my organization, Compassionate World Farming, and all other animal welfare organizations and animal welfare protectionists welcome with a lot of enthusiasm. For me, it shows that politicians really can be a force of good and deeply care about the issues that are close to their hearts. The key point, however, that I want to make is that this initiative won't be fully successful and complete if it doesn't include aquatic animals. Fish are the most utilized animals on the planet. And worldwide, according to estimates, we kill around 2 trillion fish. To put it in perspective, that's 20 times more than all terrestrial farmed animals combined, all worldwide consumed terrestrial animals. And obviously, this is the world figure. There's a lot of fisheries going around the world and a lot of aquaculture happening in Asia. But even if we look specifically at Europe, aquaculture alone is responsible for up to 1.6 billion fish being farmed and killed every year. And to put this in perspective, this is twice as many animals as all the cows, pigs, goats, sheep, duck, turkey, goose, and guinea fowls farmed in the EU. Fish are second only to chicken when it comes how numerous the animal group is. And fish, unfortunately, are, in my opinion, the most cruelly treated animal on the planet. While there is a big group of EU aquaculture producers that implement best practice and regard fish welfare as a crucial component of their work, there is also a lot of bad practice and often misunderstanding about fish sentience. A good example, in my opinion, is the Commission report from 2017. And the report showed a sad truth that majority of fish in the EU are killed in an inhumane and cruel way. The most vivid and graphic example of that being ice slurry, a method where fish are dumped into a mixture of ice and water, where they struggle to escape, and after some time will become immobile and exhausted and immobile, but still capable of feeling pain, and they eventually die from suffocation, but the agony can last for more than an hour. And in some cases, fish can be conscious still while being processed and packed. Later, several investigations from animal welfare NGOs show that on film, the reality of this type of slaughter and the reality of some of fish farms, which shocked the public. But now we know so much more about fish that we knew even several years ago. It's becoming clear that fish are way more complex than we ever imagined. And there's no doubt they're sentient, but we also know much more about their needs in captivity. Can you still see my screen? Sorry, something happened on my laptop and I'm not sure what. Hello, anyone there?
Yes, we can see you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it was a blackout on my computer. Well, so it's becoming obvious that now it shouldn't be only about how to keep fish alive and grow fast and reproduce. It should be about meeting fish behavioral and personal needs. And there's certainly a lot of research to be done. After all, we're talking about the most numerous group of vertebrates that ever lived on the planet. It's more than 32,000 species in the wild, and at least more than 200 being commercially farmed, possibly around 70 species in Europe alone. But as we move now to a different understanding of fish welfare, so not just health, but animals' psychological needs, we can see a growing shift. I'd say a revolution in science. Amazing research projects on environmental enrichment arise, studies on personalities and social hierarchies And scientists are no longer shy of talking about fish emotional states. And consumers are also changing. 79% of European citizens, and this is a big trial, now 9,000 people across 9 member states, feel that fish needs to be protected by EU welfare legislation to the same extent as land animals are, which seems logical, isn't it? Companies are also seeing the need to address the gap, and we have commercial research projects and companies producing, for example, equipment that delivers humane slaughter for fish, with stunning that meets the actual requirements of humane slaughter. We see companies setting corporate policies on fish welfare. And we also see certification schemes making the shift. And currently, all the main global certification schemes are updating their standards with welfare requirements. One best example would be the Friend of the Sea certification schemes, a global one, which introduced 25 species-specific welfare standards that cover issues as wide as humane slaughter, environmental enrichment, handling, stocking densities, and so on. But we also see the uneven playing field. Some member states are producing guidelines and training their sectors, and others, well, not so much. Fish are raised, transported, and slaughtered across Europe by billions a year. And at the moment, all that happens with no proper regulations. And in some places, it's at a higher level with regard to fish welfare, and in some at a level completely unacceptable to European citizens. Now, the Commission is planning to revise the General Farming Directive, the Transport Regulation, and the Slaughter Regulation. If fish is not included in the revision, it means the revision is incomplete, as it misses millions of sentient animals that will remain forgotten for at least another few decades. And in my opinion, this definitely can be done. The general directive can accommodate general rules for fish, and especially specific details which require more research, if that's needed, can come later as, for example, annexes. Obviously, that being said, that the general provisions would need to grant some basic protection on their own. The Transport Directive regulation, technically already applies for fish, but has no practical application as it's written with farm animals in mind. The scope is, however, similar for fish, and the transport needs for fish are well defined. We have good industry practice, so there is a strong basis to introducing that. And the Slaughter Directive finally specifically exclude fish due to lack of knowledge. And I think, well, now after 13 years from when this document was written, this statement doesn't hold. We know a lot more about fish slaughter than those 13 years ago. So this can be done as well. And I feel not including fish in the revision in a proper way would be a big mistake, and including it is a must, especially that there is already a lot done. We have the OIE guidelines, the so-called Aquatic Code, the EFSA opinions, the strategic guidelines from the Commission, which a whole welfare chapter in it, the EU platform guidelines that Katerina will talk about later on today, really good industry standards from some member states. We have the certification scheme standards, which are quite robust, and scientific publications and what's more important, applications projects already, as well as NGOs recommendations, which are also quite vast here. So I just want to end here with saying that I feel we're at the critical moment. This is the chance to ensure that the most numerous of all animals finally gets protection and decent treatment. And it's up to you, the Commission, and the Parliament to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christoph. We move on to our next speaker. João Saraiva is a fish ethologist with a special interest in welfare He leads the Fish Ethology and Welfare Group at the Center of Marine Sciences in Faro, Portugal, and he is the president of the Fish Ethol Group Association. João also lectures ethology at the University of Algarve in Portugal, and he has a research background on fish behavior, and he focuses on the application of science to improve the welfare of farmed fishes. He's also the author of many scientific papers and co-editor of a book on fish welfare. And he's part of the team behind the Fish Ethobase, the only open access database on the welfare of farmed aquatic animals. Thank you.
Hello, my name is João Saraiva, and I would like to start by thanking the organizers of this meeting for putting together such a nice session and panel on such an important topic. I have been watching and studying fish for all my life, and I would like to talk to you today about some of the insights I've been gathering and we've been gathering in my research group about the minds of fish and how important it is to take care of the welfare of fish. So first of all, why don't we care about fish? How do we come to this point? Well, the fact is that there's a large gap between the common perception of fish intelligence and the scientific reality. We do know a lot of things about the minds and the behavior and the emotions of fish. However, it's hard to translate that into the general public. And that difficulty comes with our evolutionary distance. So we are so far apart from fish and from the worlds of fish that it becomes very difficult to create empathy with fish. It's not the same with horses, for example, or pigs, or cows, or even dogs, but it's very hard to create this empathy connection with our aquatic cousins. So these biases somehow prevent the inclusion of fish and what we call the moral circle. The moral circle is where we put together all the creatures that somehow deserve to be taken care of. And fish have been traditionally left aside this moral circle. But in fact, if we take a look at the scientific evidence, we can reach easily the conclusion that fish are indeed sentient beings. For example, they can feel pain. And if you take a look at the criteria for the existence of pain in animals, we see that fish actually tick all the boxes. So they have the neural hardware to sense pain. They have the brain functions to process pain, and they have the behaviors that show when they are in pain and when they are not. On the other hand, we can use scientifically established methods to assess emotions in animals to study emotions in fish. And in fact, recent developments in neuroscience and behavior of fish show that they are able to have emotional states. We can identify them, we can define them, and we can actually measure them. So fish are indeed capable of emotional states such as fear, excitement, happiness, anxiousness, or sadness. And they do have an inner representation of the world that is far richer than our own. Because fish, for example, have more senses than many other vertebrates. So they create this representation of the world, this inner world, or what is called the Umwelt, much more complex than we can imagine. In fact, we have a representation of the world. We as humans have a representation of the world that is very visual. But fish, apart from the 5 senses that we do have and that they also have, they have hydromechanical and electrosensing, for example. They can sense pressure changes in the water, electrical signals from other animals. They have, for example, a very well-developed chemical sensing, so that they can use to track prey, to attract mates, to smell their environment. And this is something that we cannot even imagine. So they have these inner worlds that are far richer than our own. And finally, by knowing these things, we can actually map the brain of fish, and we can reach the conclusion that although the brain of fish is slightly different from our own, all the major functions that we do have as mammals in our brain are in fact in fish, and we can map them and we can actually pinpoint where they are in the brain. And we can use that mapping to study the brains of fish and, for example, assess what happens when a fish sees a prey, what happens in the brain, as you can see here on the left side of your screen. So, but knowing all this and collecting all the scientific evidence, we may ask ourselves three questions. Why does this matter? What can we do about it? And how can we do it? Well, it matters because of ethical and coherence reasons with the treatment of other animals. So we want to take care, or there is pressure, and there is a need to take care of the welfare of poultry, the welfare of cows, the welfare of horses, the welfare of pets, for example. But somehow fish are left aside, but we now know enough to put them into an ethical consideration within the rest of the farm animals. There's also reason for market value. So a fish that has experienced good welfare throughout his life or his death is a fish that is a better product. The flesh tastes better. It had less diseases. It has less chemicals to treat the diseases. So it's a product that increases his market value. And also because of the reasons of public health. So a fish that in fact has less diseases is a fish that is a better product for human consumption and a safer product for human consumption. And what can we do? Well, for example, with the scientific knowledge, we can assess species-specific requirements, and we can actually provide for those species-specific needs. And in the end, we can improve the life and the death of farmed fish. And in the life part, how can we improve the life of farmed fish? Well, this can be divided into two main sections. One is how to assess the welfare of fish. And we can do so by using what we call the operational welfare indicators, that are indicators which unquestionably signal if a fish is under good welfare or not. And we can do so by, for example, incorporating what is called the precision fish farming, which is bringing technology to the aid of aquaculture. But using this data, we can in fact do the next step, which is in fact act. And we can refine the standard operational procedures with actions such as environmental enrichment. Well, environmental enrichment is the addition of complexity to the farming medium, so it resembles the natural medium of the species we are farming. So this includes substrate, this includes structures. There are many ways, commercially available ways, to improve the life of the life of fish throughout the farming cycle. And in fact, we now know that environmental enrichment not only promotes better mental functions in fish, it also provides resistance to diseases. So fish in enriched environments are in fact more resistant to diseases, which therefore decreases the need of antibiotics to prevent and the need of treatments to treat diseases. But we can also act on the side of slaughter. So the slaughter part is a huge reason of suffering in fish. And we can use, in fact, the same or similar operational welfare indicators to measure the welfare state of fish during slaughter. And we can also use quality indicators to assess how the fish is slaughtered. And by doing so, we can actually improve the same procedures that are usually done in farms, and we can provide human stunning and slaughter, for example. Well, why is this important? Because the main way of killing fish nowadays in fish farms, especially in the Mediterranean basin, but this is widespread throughout Europe, is by asphyxia on ice. But this is this is wrong. We should not do this, and we should in fact ban this. And why is that? Because it induces prolonged suffering, sometimes even for over nearly an hour of fish asphyxiating on ice. And this suffering causes the depletion of energy reserves. And by doing so, the tissue gets more acidic and there is loss of quality without the need to do so. So if we want to act on the slaughter part of fish, we have to provide stunning methods. And there's a wide range of solutions to stun fish. Some of them are already commercially available. For example, gas stunning, percussive stunning, and electrical stunning, which can be of various ways. Wet stunning, in which the fish does not go out of the water, and the dry stunning, in which the fish is immersed from water for a couple of seconds. The point is that there's no silver bullet to all fish. So some species may require may be more suitable for mechanical stunning, others for electrical stunning. But the point is that even if we let go of the ethical considerations, if we just focus on quality, we see that flesh quality, shelf life, and market value of stunned fish has been proven to be better than the common way of stunning fish. So a stunned fish is a more ethical product and is also a better product for consumption. However, one thing must be said is that the crowding and the pre-slaughter procedures are essential. They are fundamental for the welfare of fish. So it doesn't matter if you use stunning, if you're mishandling the fish before that. So, but this requires training, and training is a fundamental aspect of the welfare of fish, as you will see. So in the end, by incorporating scientific knowledge, we can select the indicators to monitor and assess the welfare of fish, but we can also plan the appropriate actions and refine how we handle fish and refine our procedures. So by addressing species and farm-specific requirements, we can choose the appropriate methods and develop the best protocols. So in the end, how can we do this? We can focus on the solutions and not the problems. And we have to search for the science for the best applications. But how do we ensure this? Well, we can ensure this by legislation, and that is what actually brought us here. And a couple of years ago, we wrote a report on how the fish welfare legislation exists in Europe. And in this report, we identified the main problems with the current legislation, and we provide some recommendations that should be addressed in the future legislation. And I would like to highlight 3 of them, which is producing species-specific rules and guidelines on fish welfare, because we can all understand that a tuna is very different from a trout, which is different from a salmon, which is different from a sea bream. So by producing and addressing the knowledge gaps in each species, we can in fact improve the species welfare under farming. Another one is to implement the EU-wide certification and training on fish welfare. So this training will allow the farms to seamlessly improve their protocols. And the last one, and there's also a very important one, is to ban certain slaughter practices such as asphyxia on ice. These are the steps forward. Of course, they're not free from problems, but again, if we take into consideration the science and we implement and we use the science to apply on policy, we can reach certainly a better state than we are now, and we can aim for the future. And that is all. I would like to thank you for your time, and I would be available for any questions you may have through my contact. And I already apologize for not being able to be present, but I'll be fully available for questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, João. Now we move on to our next speaker, Nathan Pine Carter. He received his BA from Clare College, Cambridge University, and he took over the family business in 2012, and he quickly grew the business and established regional offices in other countries. He has been a keynote speaker at industry events and is the winner of many awards. He has produced award-winning innovations such as unique in-water electric stunning systems for fish, environmentally responsible acoustic deterrents, 3D biomass camera systems, and lice removal technology for fish. Over to Nathan now.
Hi there, thank you for the invitation to speak today. As mentioned, I'm Nathan Pine Carter, CEO of ACE Aquatic. We're backed by Blue Growth Fund Aquaspark and Dundee Investment Group Chroma Ventures. based out of Dundee, and we principally are building equipment for the humane slaughter of fish and crustaceans. And I wanted to talk today about the work that ACE Aquatic is doing, particularly in humane slaughter technology. First, what's the scale of fish consumption? A bit of this has been mentioned earlier, but just briefly, according to the UN, the global population will grow to 8.5 billion people by 2050, and fish is currently the most consumed protein source for our population. During the last 3 decades, capture fisheries increased from 69 million to 93 million tons, and world aquaculture production increased from 5 million to 63 million tons. Aquaculture has grown as a result of several global macro trends, with the most significant being the current sustainability of ocean fishing. Nevertheless, aquaculture is still in its infancy, and humane slaughter is largely only secured for those species grown with advanced levels of industrialization, such as salmon. We've started to see uptake in sea bass thanks to focused EU grants and pressure from supermarkets. However, the bulk of aquaculture species still employ unethical slaughter practices. Welfare, rather than technology, is trailing. To focus on a handful of areas, around 1 trillion wild fish are slaughtered annually. And as an aside, the global annual slaughter of prawn, crab, and carp is 30 million tons with no humane slaughter technology used. So what is the problem and what is the solution? Humane stunning has taken on a momentum thanks to consumer demand, regulatory changes, pressures from retailers, as well as improvements to efficiencies and costs as a result of using humane slaughter equipment. The alternatives, we agree, are inhumane. CO2, ice, killing in air, these have been mentioned earlier, and yet adoption across the board is painfully slow. The solution that we've created is incredibly simple and easy to integrate into any factory or boat, whether big or small. Electrodes are embedded in the transit pipe, rendering fish or crustaceans unconscious within a second. Here we can see a comparison of before and after introduction of our humane slaughter equipment. Clearly, on the left, before our equipment is introduced, the process is incredibly stressful to the fish, who endure time in air before reaching the bleeding station. After adoption of our system on the right, the fish are unconscious while they await bleeding. The process is less stressful for fish and for staff, and the knock-on effects for the farmer in terms of cost of quality downgrades is immense. Introduction of humane slaughter can confer better quality, better efficiencies in the harvest process, more reliable killing methods, and better safety for slaughter staff. We've worked with several universities around humane slaughter, particularly Bristol University and Stirling University, on an Innovate UK grant to demonstrate the quality improvements, and we're currently engaged on a Humane Slaughter Association grant to help introduce and communicate these benefits to farmers around the world. We've demonstrated increased efficiencies in project work carried out by Scottish sea farmers and cost savings. We get twice the tonnage, stunned in half the time, using half the staff. And the system itself is well engineered for international rental, with no moving parts and robust construction for deployment at sea. We designed this stunning method to be utilized for the maximum range of species, from wild fish to farmed species. So far, we've not found a species we cannot stun humanely with this technology. And the solution is tailored for any market and any scale. Larger systems can achieve huge tonnages of up to 60 tons per hour, and these systems can be stacked for more. Systems with a smaller footprint achieve 5 tons per hour. And next year, we bring to market a 20-kilogram humane batch stunner, enabling extremely small-scale stunning of a handful of fish or crustaceans, whether on a boat or a farm. We can see here the first sea bass stunner we designed for Nereus in Greece, installed back in 2014. This is a salmon stunner built into a recirculation farm in Switzerland. This system humanely stuns yellowtail in Germany for supplying local sushi restaurants who appreciate the superior quality from using the slaughter method. This is a harvest vessel for sea trout in Denmark. The boat pulls up alongside the nets and pumps the fish from the pen directly aboard, where the fish are stunned before being bled and sent into the hold. A more recent vessel installation, this demonstrates the ease with which we can retrofit the pipeline stunner into an existing 20-meter harvest vessel, and it's easy to see how such a system can be integrated for wild fish. This video will show the huge impact a humane slaughter system can have in a less developed farming context. On the left, you see the manner in which the bulk of fish farms kill their fish in the Mediterranean, using a braille net and dumping it into totes. As mentioned earlier, this can take many hours for the fish to die. On the right, you can see the same farms after the introduction of the Aquatic stunning system. This is mounted inside the boat in the hold, and the fish that have been stunned come out completely unconscious and are effectively killed on the ice, but in an unconscious state. So clearly, stress, suffering, and quality are drastically improved. Our conveyor variant for stunning prawns, crabs, and lobsters or flatfish shows the versatility of this technology. All of our innovations have welfare of animals at their heart. Having succeeded in introducing to the market a universal stunning system for fish, crustaceans, and other species requiring humane slaughter, we're now turning our attention to pumping systems and bleeding systems to ensure zero handling and stress-free solutions at slaughter. We have a range of customers around the globe who are delighted with their stunning equipment and would be more than happy to speak to you should you like more insights about this technology. So thank you very much for your time today, and please feel free to contact me if you need any further information or you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now we move on to our next speaker, Caterina Marini. Caterina received her doctorate in 2011 and has served in many positions in the Greek Ministry of Rural Development and Food since 2001. She was the head of the Division of Animal Welfare from 2015 to 2017, and now is the head of the Animal Welfare Division for Farm and Laboratory Animals. She's currently the Greek national contact point for the implementation of animal welfare legislation in the European Commission, and is leading the voluntary initiative on fish welfare of the EU platform of animal welfare. He also teaches fish welfare in a postgraduate course of the Department of Agronomy at the University of Thessaly in Greece. Caterina, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olga. Good morning from Athens. On the behalf of the Greek Ministry of Rural Development and Food, I would like to sincerely thank both the members of the European Parliament who host today's event, as well as Compassion in World Farming for giving us the opportunity to present to you this good work that was convened by myself representing Greece and our ministry regarding fish welfare. I think that we are all very much well aware that fish welfare is a topic that really interests a lot the public, interests a lot all stakeholders and policy organizations. We have seen that during all those last years, during these at least these 3 or 4 last years, a lot of things have changed regarding the importance and the importance of fish in the European atmosphere. So it's very important for us to give this speech today in order to inform you about these guidelines that have been produced and what we can do and what knowledge is there in terms of policy, from the policy's point of view, in order to see how we can proceed with the welfare legislation. Next slide, please. The European Union platform for animal welfare has been in action since 2017, And within its context and its work activities, voluntary initiatives were developed in order to address issues that have not been addressed today by the EU legislation. So we created, along with many other colleagues, this initiative working group on fish welfare in order to show and promote the fact that fish welfare legislation needs to be in place and start developing some practical guidelines, both for competent authorities, and stakeholders and business operators in order to facilitate the work at the first stage and place the basis for some rules at the second stage. So this own initiative, we considered it to be very important. And why? Because, of course, it has been repeated many times today that fish are sentient beings and can feel pain, as how very, very nicely presented to us. So, but all other speakers have clearly stated as well. So fish are particularly sensitive to their environment, and they're particularly sensitive to handling procedures. A very, very small deviation from routine work can cause a lot of stress to fish. This is on the one hand. On the other hand, we have some general EU legislation and very general reference to the fish welfare. On the other hand, we have the European Union treaties and we have all the general legal framework in place, which require that we pay full regard to the welfare of all animals. However, more things clearly needed to be stated in the EU legislation. In the preparatory work before the publication of the European Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy, we have in 2017 what Christoph also already mentioned to you, the European Commission report on fish transport and slaughter. Common practices. So this is a paper that Christoph referred to it very detailedly in many details before. So this paper calls for further dialogue on fish welfare and in the European Union, and it was a very nice, a very nice motivation for the EU Animal Welfare Platform to accept this initiative for fish. The guidelines that were created by this initiative and were presented in the meeting of the 15th of June 2020, adopted by the EU plenary and published in the EU website, we hope to allow farmers, competent authority, but also the public to implement current knowledge. Next slide, please. In this slide, you're able to see the most recent official data from the European Union regarding the farmed fish production in the European Union. You're able to see that we have a huge production of fish, which, however, covers only the 10% of fish consumption in European Union by all EU citizens. Next slide, please. In this slide, you're able to see the members of this initiative, of the own initiative for fish welfare, convened by the Greek, by the Hellenic Republic, and then you are able to see representatives from various member states, from non-governmental organizations, from business organizations, representatives, other stakeholders, as well as independent experts. Observer statuses were granted to the World Organization for Animal Health, DG Mare, and of course, DG Sante was supervising the whole process. Again, once more, I would sincerely like to thank Eurogroup for Animals for the excellent secretariat services and all other non-governmental organizations, stakeholder research institute who funded the operation of this group, and Compassion in World Farming was one of the biggest sponsors of that group. Thank you very much once more for that. Next slide, please. Let's have a quick look at the content of this these guidelines. So two sections are there. The first section is the water quality, and it's divided in two parts. So we have put in place, in order to remind, the provisions from the Council of Europe recommendation concerning farm fish, back from the past, but which served as a very good combination of legal and scientific basis to work on. And then The second part, which are the guides to good animal welfare practice regarding water quality. So this is divided into some general principles, some particular guidelines for the operator, and some guidelines on specific water quality parameters and operating procedures. Next slide, please. In a few words, in this slide, you're able to see a part of the general principles, which acknowledge, of course, that the poor water quality creates a stress response in fish. We are all very much aware that the emission of organic matter and nutrients in water, as well as the climate change that is very important and absurd in these recent times, may also have an impact on fish welfare. All these parameters can cause chronic stress, especially in the long term, and can impair immune function, growth, and reproductive function. So this means that welfare is not only also a part of the well-being of the animals themselves, but it can also affect the farm, the business, industry outcome. So this comes to an end that we have to work on it for all sides in order to achieve the welfare from all the sides. So the threats to fish welfare from physiological or pathological disturbances caused by water quality relate not only to its parameters' absolute levels, but also to their rate of change. They also relate to the size of the fish, their developmental stage, the previous experience of the fish, both within its social group, but also with humans who interact with them on the daily basis, its health status, and of course, different coping strategies and capacity. Next slide, please. Very useful guidelines for the operator are presented, which say in a few words that all parties responsible for the keeping of fish should ensure that consideration is given to the potential impact of water quality of the welfare of fish. Both business operators, workers, people who work for the maintenance of equipment, private veterinarians working, other scientists working in the farm, but also competent authorities should have a clear view of all parameters affecting water quality in order to safeguard the animal welfare. Training is one of the most important parameters regarding the increase of animal welfare level in all species, let alone fish. So the knowledge can be a result of formal training and also combination of practical experience in the field. Knowledge could comprise method for inspection of fish, the teaching of welfare indicators already mentioned today, the operation and maintenance of equipment relevant to the water quality parameters, systems for management of water supply, methods for the management of situations frequently encountered, and of course, contingency planning, very important in our times. And of course, guidelines for the analysis of water source and supply to be ensured for agriculture site. Next slide, please. Furthermore, guidelines on specific water quality parameters and operating procedures are presented with full scientific detail. I won't enter into much today. However, we need to take into account and remember that water quality should be monitored regularly and preferably with an automated system in order to facilitate things, register data, and be able to have a retrospective view when something goes wrong. The most important parameters for monitoring are, of course, the oxygen, ammonia, ionized or unionized, carbon dioxide, pH, and temperature. A lot of the scientific details are presented in the guidelines. I strongly encourage you to go through them and get informed about this. The guidelines also address the keeping of eggs and young fish, the handling of dead and moribund fish, details about transport containers, because water quality in transport containers is of vital importance for the animals to reach their place of destination safe, healthy, and alive. Details about supersaturation, toxic metals, sulfur, and suspended soils are there. Next slide, please. Let's move on to the second section of the document, fish handling. Again, we present some provisions from the Council of Europe recommendation having to do with handling, what was there, and what is in there, again, in 3 parts: general principles, guidelines for the operator, and guidelines on specific practices. Next slide, please. The general principles, in a nutshell, say that handling causes stress, undoubtedly. Even a minor handling procedure that is taken place, even if it's performed correctly or not correctly, can cause stress to the animals. Even a brief period of stress may bring long-lasting effects. So, inappropriate handling procedures can lead to injury, pain, distress, and suffering. As a result, increased disease incidence, increased mortality, and reduced appetite, impaired development, and deformities in fish may ensue. Next slide, please. All parties responsible for the keeping of fish should ensure that consideration is given to the potential impact of handling on the welfare of the fish. Knowledge may be a result of formal training and practical experience. Again, we give a lot of importance to training because this changes the culture of care in all things in life. If we know what we have to do and how to do it, then a lot of things can change. So the methods for the inspection of fish, operation and maintenance of equipment related to handling, welfare indicators, live fish handling, management of situations frequently encountered during handling, and always the contingency plans are important aspects for the personnel to improve handling procedures. The operator should have relevant procedures that identify critical points in the handling procedure, which should always be kept to an absolute minimum, propose corrective measures, and indicate when to discontinue handling in order to maintain adequate fish welfare. Next slide, please. Some specific practices. So, all starts from a good preparation. Every activity needs a good planning and a good preparation. So, preparatory activities should include inspecting the condition of the fish, get them accustomed to the environment or the new environment to be placed in, and of course, feed withdrawal. In this part, I would like to stress that feed withdrawal has some very specific rules. It must not take place for a lot of time because we could have irreversible changes to the metabolic rate of the fish and which could cause lethargy and death in the end of the day. So this needs to be take place with a lot of consciousness. Crowding. Crowding should avoid invoking a maximal stress response. The impact of crowding should be reduced primarily by carrying it out in several steps and gradually, with people who know what to do again. Size grading, another important activity which takes place in fish farms. Size grading prevents the development of aggressive behaviors and cannibalism and offers better access to feed. Instances of grading should be carefully planned and kept to a minimum. Equipment, including pumps and nets, should be designed to avoid physical injury and be maintained in good condition. Finally, remember, we have already mentioned that and discussed this, and I hope to have a lively discussion later on. Fish should not be allowed to asphyxiate under any circumstances. Very important. Next slide, please. What about the next steps? We have already the published Farm to Fork strategy in 2020, which mentions, among other, that farm fish and seafood is a very important sector for environmentally sustainable food production. Better animal welfare is definitely a high priority, including a major revisions of regulation, including fish farm welfare, possibly fish stunning, fish transport. And the EU aquaculture policy is placed always in the context of improving animal welfare and regulations. Animal welfare is clearly stated now in all aquaculture policy documents. Next slide, please. Good, thank you. Last July 2021, the 6th of July 2021, an inception impact assessment for animal welfare was published by the European Commission. In this document, you are able to see some clear reference to fish welfare, and you're able to see that there are many problems and many potentials are clearly described there in order to, while waiting for the impact assessment, which will take place next year in 2022. So there we are able to see that we have we need to have a new transport regulation, an updated regulation in transport after 16 years. And this needs to mention fish and be in line with current science in the field. We have to put and play in place some species-specific rules for fish during farming. This is clearly mentioned and it is a need. And of course, we need to discuss how to have and improve the species-specific rules for stunning farm fish at slaughter. This is something that is very promising, we hope. Strategic guidelines for the most sustainable and competitive EU aquaculture have been also published by the European Commission in last April, in April 21, if I'm not mistaken. And there you can see that the code of conduct on fish welfare is established. Auditable fish welfare indicators should be put in place, probably mandatory and voluntary. And of course, we have to develop species-specific husbandry best practices, including environmental enrichment. Next slide, please. The guidelines for fish water quality and handling, we are very happy to learn that the European Commission will be translating these into all official EU languages very soon. We very much greet this event and we hope that this will really help all people involved to improve their knowledge and improve animal welfare, of course. Of course, the ongoing delivery of the animal welfare legislative review is in place, and the aquaculture policy, of course. All member states are there to assist in this huge work, and we really look forward to all these activities and the outcomes of all this consultation that takes place during this period for this topic. So, key message when finishing this presentation, the knowledge is available now. The animal welfare legislative opportunity is open now. So, the mechanism to support aquaculture operators and competent authorities are being put in place. The time is right now to make legal provisions for fish welfare. Apologies for the time that I consumed. Thank you very much. Final slide. Thank you very much. Greetings from Athens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katerina, for this very nice presentation. And we move to our last speaker. Last but not least is Andrea Governor. Andrea is a veterinarian who graduated from Milan University and has been with the European Commission since February 1999. He is leading the unit on animal welfare and antimicrobial resistance in DG Health and Food Safety. In his career, Andrea has been dealing with several strategic and policy initiatives in the area of animal health and welfare, first at the Ministry of Health in Rome, and then at the European Commission. So concerning animal welfare, Andrea has been involved in several initiatives, both at EU level and international level. For a 5-year period until September 2020, he also supervised the unit in charge of the eradication of animal diseases, and he has coordinated the implementation of the European legislation on official controls in the food and feed area. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me and it's fine. Good. Thank you very much. Well, first of all, thank you also for leaving me at the conclusion of all this very interesting presentation, because it was very, very much helpful also for me to learn a lot and see how much competence and how much qualification is attached to this area. And it's clear cut that as a commission and what's next for the future of welfare legislation, we are, and it was said also by Christoph, we are exactly in a quite historically moment. The fact that we are revising the acquis means that we are revising also the approach and the concept of the EU policies in this area, and the mandate of the FARP4, that is to enlarge the scope, fits for the purpose of discussing also what's next for aquaculture. The initiative mentioned also by Caterina. Of course, these have been extremely useful and important in a phase prior to this one, in which, in fact, the revision of the current acquis was not foreseen and not a political priority. As a consequence, we are now in a moment, and you saw from the inception impact assessment, where we have already, first of all, started to scrutinize the quality and the fitness of our legislation. And when we talk about fish and aquaculture, in particular for the area of killing and the area of slaughter and the area of transport, you see how the situation is indeed demanding intervention. For the killing, we have already a commitment in the sense of examining and including these in the future revision with the capacity to act in two options, or with a larger spectrum of species, or to get into a very targeted and detailed couple of ones. We have sea bass and gifted sea bream, and this is exactly something we are discussing based on the knowledge, but also on the way we intend to shape the future of legislation. It could become also, as we discussed for other areas, a possibility to enact a series of empowerments and mandates for the future that could leave time and capacity to work on this for the after the 2023. That is in fact the deadline we have decided together to produce the new proposals. For animal transport, indeed the situation is a little more complex, in the sense that we have not yet a policy option per se, in terms of including or doing more for transport of fish at this stage. If you look to the current impact assessment, inception impact assessment, we are now really looking for establishing a dialogue as much as possible with the experts, and to build up reasoning that could support a further revision of the animal transport, if possible, in the same line of what was said for the killing of fish. But as it is now, as I repeat, this is an area where is not yet a policy option. So we have to be concrete and look into what is also the possibility we have in terms of capacity to build all these for 2023. The very good and interesting element to say is that economic impacts and also all the different elements we need in terms of including new rules for welfare for fish in Europe, all this data, as we are collecting them in an area of killing, probably will be very much an helpful shortcut to advance also in other areas. As I have not yet mentioned even the farming, that is, in fact, I don't mention because for the moment on farm animal welfare, we are at the very, very preliminary stage of discussing this. As you know, at least on that area and in more general, we have a huge step down, in my opinion, comparing with the past. What happened? It is published on the Sante website. For the first time, and is historical, we have requested the European Food Safety Authority to produce opinion on the welfare of farmed fish for farming, so not killing or other scope. And this is with an ambitious set of opinion, because they will cover from the farmed salmon and trout to even certain invertebrates and decapods that will come later. This is a roadmap that will be keeping them busy logically for time to go, but this is still in the perspective of a policy approach that will engage from the proposal of the Commission to work out further. This is also something that is coping, allows us to cope in terms of course, the workload and the situation we have. Now, it's clear that DG Sant is not alone in all this, in the sense that we are embracing, as I saw from the presentation, and we said, and Christoph said clearly, in terms of numbers, 1.6 billion of farmed fish, second only to poultry. So it's clear that we are embracing an area that is having a huge, important economic effect on and important, we can say, social aspect, because it's surely not related to a few member states or whatever. It's getting really relevant. So on one side, I recognize, and this is a personal consideration, that will be really missing a target to let fish out of this important revision of the legislation. So I mean, to not at least foresee a program of work and a political possibility. But at the same time, we have to be extremely aware of what we know and what could be done in terms of economic and social and all the impacts that we have, and the science, last but not least. So it's a work to do in very much transparency and cooperation, as we are trying to build in every our side. And as I said, we are not alone in terms of also DGs implicated, because as you know, DG Mare and all the colleagues are really well involved in their promotion and support for research and innovation, for indicators, as we said, also for the possibility to really increase the knowledge and skills by aquaculture producers. These are the recommended action that came from the Commission to the member state. This is also why, as I was mentioned, we are translating the guidelines that are related to the platform in all the languages, and they will consider it relevant to continue in that sense, and to produce also more and more information to aquaculture producer about the relevant research and innovation that we could have on animal welfare. As usual, and this is also, and I conclude with this, as usual, we are also with the EU having an incredible leading role. No? You know that we had an important report on the effects on animal welfare in international trade and related international areas, the effect of our work. Our work and the baseline indicator when we look into the 90s was a revolutionary work, thanks to all the work done with the European Parliament at that time, even if it was only a consultative possibility. But I mean, it was leading it was a leading light in the global scenario of welfare. For aquaculture, it is more than a leading light, whatever we start here. It's even quite an explosive light, because I have to say very little exists apart from, in terms of legislation, of course, comparing with what a lot is in development in terms of knowledge and scientific awareness. So, in conclusion, I think being in front of a global market in a number of animals and an activity that involves and is having an impact on the whole EU is clear-cut a very important discussion to continue, and to look forward, if possible, as much as we can to develop it better and what will be the welfare rules. That's of course not an engagement because it's myself reflecting on it, but is the way we should drive the process, in my opinion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And we're moving, trying to move quickly here. We have some questions, but since there are quite a few people who have questions, I will just take a couple, and then the rest will please send them to eu.office@crwf.org. You will also be sent this email address in after the webinar from the platform. And please send any questions you have, and we will try to answer them. In the meantime, I will just ask a couple of questions. One is directed to all speakers. If any of the speakers could elaborate on recent developments in Japan, where 2 fish engineered with new genetic engineering techniques have been recently deregulated for human consumption. Apparently, there was no risk assessment carried out by the Japanese authorities, the participant is asking whether this should serve as a warning to EU regulators who are currently looking into deregulation of new genetic engineering in plants and possibly animals at a later stage. If anyone could pick up this question, please.
Well, I could just make a very short comment here. Obviously not being expert on gene editing, but I'd always say I'm very concerned where this type of activity is done without making a risk assessment, regardless of one's opinion about gene editing. The risk assessment is a must in situations like that. And in the context of fish welfare specifically, because that's what the event is about, I just say in general, whether it's gene editing or selective breeding, for that sense, fish welfare is quite a new group of animals to be farmed. The land farmed animals we know, have been with us for thousands of years, and for many fish species, we're sort of going for new species because those would get consumer interest, but there's very little assessment done on fish welfare in that. And the same goes with selective breeding, where the species are mainly bred for being sort of more effective or more attractive to the consumer, and not necessarily with welfare in mind, which I think is very important to address. We have the triploid salmon, which is one example, which has quite some severe welfare issues, and there are concerns around that. But even if there is no gene editing, there can be fish welfare compromised just by the selection of species to be farmed and also the selection within the farming process. So that would be my general comment.
Okay, thank you very much. And there's one more question. This one is directed to the Commission, to Andrea. Aquaculture is very diverse, and some aquatic species, such as octopus, are unsuited to farming. How can legislators influence industry to encourage species better suited to farming and prevent other species from being farmed?
Well, as I said, the situation. Thank you for the question. Of course, the situation about our approach to legislating the area of fish welfare is at the moment in studying and evaluating the impact of this initiative, and it should be seen also not only in relation to the fact of considering one species versus the other in terms of fish, but is also to see the impact on the rest of the work, on all the customers. So the idea is that being in a situation where practically the structure of the legislation of today was never thought not fit for aquaculture, nor even the transport of fish, but because they are living and they are all the technical processes are totally different. the problem here is more to conceive and imagine a different structure. I could even say that could even be we could have an ideal, if it was an ideal word in my opinion, a parallel system of legislative requirement that is one on land and one in the sea, and that will be then in the sea, in the sense in the water. So in the sense to open up a capacity to be more concrete in legal terms and more adaptive to whatever science will bring us more and more. And in the case of octopus, as other species, as I said, this now is extremely difficult if you think about the legislative castle we have, the structure of it, but could become really possible if we are able and we have the capacity to structure this acquis in a different manner. And probably we'll have to go, if we imagine already transport, probably we'll have to imagine a different regulation, because it is not surely the same, it's not the same distance, are not the same needs, are not the same competence, and the vehicles are totally different. So it's something to talk about. But that's because I respond on the side of the legislative part. I cannot respond in the scientific way because, of course, I have less knowledge than many of you.
Okay, thank you very much. And just one last question coming from one of the participants. I'm not sure who is this directed to, but why is the focus predominantly on farmed fish instead of wild capture fisheries? And if the technology exists for onboard vessels, shouldn't all fisheries, wild and farmed, be covered in the legislative requirements? Maybe this one is directed to Andrea again, I'm not sure.
I miss it a little bit. Could be I had an audio bug. The question, I mean, sorry, Olga. I think you're muted.
You're
I'm sorry. Why is the focus predominantly about farmed fish? I think it's not written clearly here. I think what the participant was asking was that basically the technology exists for humane slaughter on board vessels. So shouldn't all fisheries be covered by the legislative requirements? So wild and farmed.
Well, yes, now I got it. Thank you for repeating it. Yes, indeed, it's indeed a question to the Commission for at least for the moment, because member states have their own initiative. To be honest, we are not touching upon that. But what is the Commission definitely and the EU legislation? Why farm fish? Simply farming intending the whole process, farming, transport, and killing. The fact is that the domain in which DG Sante is moving and operating in the legislative requirement is connected with activities that are implicated in what is in fact business activity and farming activity that is where we have built up our legislation. So connected with rules that are also related with the common agricultural policy and the fact that we have developed so these in terms of hand in hand with the measure of supporting animal welfare in that sense. The situation of animals in the wild is not something that we have, legally speaking, the possibility to act at this moment. The difference is that one merely is not that we have a different setup of knowledge or sensibility about the issue at this stage. And then I suppose that on the killing, probably there will be a possibility in a way, and that will be a transfer of knowledge and capacity and standards that could be adopted in a certain sense. That's more or less the situation today.
Okay, thank you very much. And now we go to MEP Sylvia Spork, who has been patiently waiting.
Yes, thank you very much. And I think this is very clear from today's discussion that there is still a lot to be done if it comes to protection of aquatic animals. The matter seems to become even more pressing as we are hearing about plans to farm octopuses also in EU countries on a large scale. There are more and more scientific reports clearly indicating the need for better protection for aquatic animals. Also, slowly it is being recognized by the governments. Not even 2 weeks ago, the scope of the UK Animal Welfare Bill was extended to recognize inter alia lobsters, octopuses and crabs as sentient beings. However, the majority, the society, still do not notice these issues. A few months ago, in cooperation with Green Rev Institute, a Polish advocacy think tank, I have published an initiative which I called 5 for Animals. I put forward systemic and legislative postulates concerning ending animal exploitation. One of them was ending recreational and sport fishing. According to animal rights activists, and the opinion I fully share, it is simply a form of hunting. Even though I have proposed to end animal farming entirely until 2040 in my initiative, it was fishing ban that was all over the news, including tabloids, where I got 3 covers. My opponents claimed that recreational fishing is just a hobby, a passion, a lifestyle. In Poland, this is a hobby for 3 million people. The argument of animal suffering has not been recognized by them at all. It clearly shows that we have a lot to do in the area of legislation in terms of education and raising people's awareness in particular. While we are talking about exploitation of animals and animal farming, we have to include aquatic animals as they are still being left behind most of the time with no good scientific reason. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. And now MEP Francisco Guerreiro would like to take the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. Just a quick note to share that obviously we have been working on PESH committee to try to establish a platform so we can move on with and start the own initiative reports. So that's why I also think that it's very relevant for us to be listening to the specialists and also hear representatives of the Commission. I do think that we should in the next year have a cross-border party initiative to study these sanctioned animals and to better adapt the European Commission to their working plan regarding this sector. Once again, thank you very much for the insights, really productive, and I do wish to continue to work with all the parties and all the stakeholders. So next year we can move on with this own initiative report focusing this issue.
Thank you very much. In closing this webinar, I would like to thank all our speakers for being here today and participating in this webinar, as well as all attendees who waited patiently, at least for the first few minutes when we were experiencing some technical difficulties, for which we apologize. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar. You will be receiving a message from the platform, an email, and there you can find, you will receive more information. We will be sending people the presentations if you request them. You will need to email us at eu.office@crwf.org, and there is a recording of the webinars for anyone who requests this recording. Thank you very much. Of course, we wait to hear more from the Commission in the months ahead regarding fish welfare, and in the meantime, we are very glad to see this increased interest in the issue of fish welfare coming from citizens as well as many other stakeholders, including NGOs and the industry. Thank you very much, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you very much. Thanks to all.
Thanks, bye.